bigger television channels here in Russia that we call federal channels because they can be watched throughout the country. Around about 96 to 97% of the population can watch them, and that makes those channels very powerful because their share on the market is around 60 to 70%. They get around 2/3 of the market altogether. A typical Russian citizen living in a big city at the same time would have access to 20 to 30 television channels, including local channels, entertainment channels, sport channels, and others. But the market on its own, because of this principle, because it's such a big country, because the television is received from the air, is different. Like I said, those 3 channels are much more powerful than all the others competing against them. This way, you get a very special structure, unlike in countries like the United Kingdom, where, for example, a big channel would hold 1.5% of the market. That would be considered a great success. That would be considered a powerful share on the market. Here it's 20%. Feel the difference. And in a situation when you've got such powerful channels, of course, they have a lot of possibilities to influence not only decision making, but also the hearts and minds of the people. For example, there's a very famous episode in our history when the country was facing presidential elections in 1996, and the president, who was then the head of state, Mr. Boris Yeltsin, was seeking his second term. He was running for his second term, but when the election campaign started, his approval rating was very low. It was around 2%, a hopeless situation for an incumbent president. Everybody was almost sure that the opposition communists would win that vote. Everybody was almost sure Yeltsin cannot make it. But then it was about 3 to 4 months before the elections. The state-controlled channels, those 3 among them, started a very aggressive propaganda campaign ahead of the elections, and very swiftly, very quickly changed the standings in the opinion polls. The approval ratings of the incumbent president increased, and his popularity increased, although no substantial success, economic or whatsoever, was achieved in the country at that time. And he got about 35% in the first round of voting. That brought the elections to a runoff, and he won in the second round with 55%. The Iraqi war. And you would see very few people criticizing the choice of the President Bush who decided to invade Iraq. And there were a lot of discussions before the war, but when the war started, there was mute. All the voices that were against the war, they suddenly stopped talking. And there were several politicians which said openly in the public that I think it was a bad idea. I was against going to Iraq, but now that our people are fighting there, our boys and girls are fighting there, we have to do it until the end. We cannot criticize them, because it would be as if we were shooting them in the back when they're facing this difficult situation, when they're fighting this war. And I think pretty much any country, any centralized country with global interests faces those choices, those difficult choices. And of course they impose certain limits on the coverage, on what the journalists do as far as such difficult situations are concerned. From my personal experience, I would say that there are exceptions to those rules, because in a country like Belgium, where I worked for about 6 years, you've got a very special media situation. It's a country split in two, between 2 language groups. It's a country of 10 million, where around 4 million people speak French and 6 million people speak Dutch. And since those 2 communities don't really like each other very much, they've got 2 public televisions broadcasting in their own languages. They effectively live separately, because geographically the country is also split into the Dutch-speaking live in the north, while the French-speaking live in the south. And they've got completely different issues around the border because the north is industrialized, but the south is more agricultural. The lifestyle there is different, is agriculture. Anybody from Belgium in here? No, we haven't got too many Europeans. And because of that, the media is also involved in that linguistic fight, in that fight between two language groups. And the most important issue the media would have to decide sometimes would be something that in other countries would seem not important at all. For example, they would spend a lot of time discussing on television whether it's right when a French-speaking citizen of Belgium gets a traffic fine order in which we think the content may be received by the audience. We do it on a large scale when we start the morning with the news, then we put a talk show, then we put a documentary, then let's say we put a football match from the World Cup, and then we put another documentary, and then we go back to the evening news, and we think that those people who watch football, they might stay for the movie which is right after the football because that movie would be interesting to that type of audience which usually watches football. These are all our presumptions of those people who work in television. We leave no choice to the people who watch television. The only choice they have is with their remote control. If they don't like what we're showing, they would switch on to the other channel. But there it's going to be all over the same again. People who work at that other channel have decided for them what they will watch. Internet is totally different. People surfing the internet are used to a totally different concept. They are clicking themselves with their own mouse on what they want to watch. They won't let anybody impose choices on them. And we have, as broadcasters, a huge issue nowadays, especially in Russia. The younger generation does not like what they see on television, and therefore they massively make the choice for the internet, where they can choose themselves what to watch. If something is not interesting, they've got YouTube, they've got torrents where you can upload and download video content of very different types. They've got all sorts of news sources from Russia and for abroad. You've got blogging. You can see video and pictures from anywhere, and those are the choices you make yourself and not that are not made for you. And this is, of course, a big challenge that television is facing, and that changes the market that television is working on, because we've been used to covering a large universal audience. Let's say people watching my channel would be women and men, young